So here we are at the demo yard in Winchester. Yesterday and today were 2 nursery deliveries. This is the bulk of the woody plant material that's going into the yard. A little bit of it will come out here because I might have overbought relative to what we can do, but given the beauty, the fabulous condition of these, it's all good. So I'm going to show you this is this is like Christmas. I can't get over this. They're gorgeous. Look how beautiful this holly is, even though it's it's what's called balled and burlap. It's been sitting on concrete at a nursery. See that it's full of new growth. See the pale green leaves. These are really good sized hollies. These cost a few $100. And they're going to give permanent screening to one of the areas of the yard. There's going to be a nook with privacy screening with 5 of these beautiful bushes, creating a half circle within which there will be some chairs and a table. They will provide berries. There's male and female, and the birds love the berries. They give a little fall color, winter color, but the bush stays green all year. So moving along, these are blueberries. Again, notice how healthy and beautiful this plant is, how full of berries it is. We bought 4 or 5, a couple that are already as tall as I am and a couple that are small, and there will be a little blueberry corner. The family really wanted to have a lot of fruits for them as well as for wildlife, so we put in more berries than maybe the average gardener would want. More holly. This is a honeysuckle, native honeysuckle, very fragrant. Again, a gorgeous big plant. It will grow up to a couple of stories if you run it up a building. We're not sure yet whether we're going to put it on the side of the house so that it goes up into that veranda, brings insects, brings hummingbirds. And you know, when bees have some place where they're getting nectar and pollen, they really don't bother humans. They don't care. They're focused on their food. And it blooms all summer. If you water it, it'll bloom into September or October, depending on the plant. So they're big value for humans and other species. It's one of my favorites. It's called gold flame honeysuckle, not the Japanese honeysuckle. So you're looking here into a deciduous jungle till we get all the way to the back, that evergreen. This is a crabapple prairie fire. This one looks like it's a little dry. Given the root ball size, they're not easy to keep on concrete for weeks, but they did, which was great, and they kept it alive. When it gets watered up and into the soil, it's going to be very happy and it will push out a bunch of new leaves. This is a cherry, I want to say. Yep. Bing cherry from the same nursery. Because it's smaller, it's easier to keep well hydrated above ground. Look how beautiful it is. Again, full of new growth here, all this paler green. This is going to fruit heavily. This is a variety that sets a lot of flowers and has a lot of fruit. Again, it'll be a people-animal competition. Me, I don't even bother. I just let the animals have all the fruits in my yard. This is an elderberry. We have a couple of varieties of elderberry here. They will get as tall as I am. They're the green leaf, and then there's a yellow leaf, lacy yellow leaf one somewhere in there. It'll get as tall as I am and pretty much 5 by 5, 6 tall. Full of flowers, a white table flower, big flat surface, and every one of those little bitty flowers in that bunch becomes a berry. So there'll be very heavy fruit set. And they're yummy. People make cordials and people make just pies and all kinds of great things. There are 5 going into the garden here because they are so easy to grow and because they are so prolific. Dogwood was kind of a coup to find one that size. That's a 2-inch caliper or diameter tree. Spectacular, vivid rose petals in spring. These are fruits beginning to set. They're red. They're very popular with birds. To me, the only drawback of dogwoods is that they're not fragrant. A particular favorite of mine, I did a lot of field work in western Florida, the red clay hills, and this is very common in the forests there. Here we are as far north as it goes. It's called American Beautyberry. It has these little bitty pink flowers. It sets beautiful pink berries that look kind of like a porcelain or china berry fruit, lavender, purple, and you can put it in places that it's hard to find other things. It does well as an understory plant in dampish environments, and the birds love it. They are just crazy about these berries. So I think it's a wonderful, slightly offbeat thing that will give a lot of habitat value for birds. They're not that easy to find around here. I found two and bought them both. It's probably worth saying I spent a fair amount of time loitering at these nurseries because stock comes and goes. They have some idea of what's coming, but not 100%, and stuff would show up unexpectedly. So I love loitering in nurseries because it's fun. You get to see all these amazing plants. And there were things that they said they were out of and they weren't going to get any more, and then I would show up and there were 3 dozen of them. Elderberries was one of those examples. So if you enjoy it, if you have the time, it's a nice place to spend an hour in the evening and keep track of the inventory there. And then when something offbeat comes along, like these American Beautyberries, you're there before anybody else. So it pays. This is a viburnum. There are several native varieties. No, they're actually species. They, again, have ridiculously fragrant flowers, which is one reason I love them. They need moisture, but not too moist. They will rot out if the ground is too moist. They're those flower heads, of course, produce a lot of fruits, and again, that's really good for the birds. And they give nice color in fall. The berries get to be dark blackish. The flowers are white and creamy, and there are a couple that are pink, but I think that's not the native variety. Witch hazel, native, one of the earliest blooming things in my yard. I keep trying to extend the blooming season with natives. It now goes, with climate warming, from February to October or November, depending on the fall. This is the witch hazel of the medicinal properties. People make lotion, they make solution, it's used for a bunch of things. Because it blooms so early, it gets the early pollinators, which is pretty great. And it has lovely yellow, like tiny little strips of streamers, yellow and rust streamers. It'll get shrubby or grow upright depending on how you prune it. This is not native. This is a Japanese maple. The way I talk about that, or the way I think about that, is a couple of different aspects. You get to put in something you love because it's your garden and because you love it. And whether it's native, meaning it originated in this area, might be less important than whether it has good ecosystem function. So by ecosystem function, I mean, does it feed a lot of creatures? Does it have pollen, nectar, fruits, something that's going to feed insects, birds, whatever is in your area? Does it provide woody structure for nests? And is it going to take over and crowd out native species? So this does okay on 2 of those criteria. It provides woody structure for nests, and it's not going to take over. It's a single tree that's going to stay where it belongs, and they basically do not drop fertile maple copters, little seeds, so it's not going to take over in the area. This is the second viburnum we have in this yard. See the wonderful veining on the leaves that give it this great texture, and see that it is also setting fruit already and going to make a lot of birds happy when later in the season. These are not berries that can be eaten by humans and other species. These are just for non-humans. The frame of the theme was kind of burgundy and chartreuse, and we tried to build around that. Not that the whole garden is like that, but those are the couple of the dominant points. This is the biggest tree that I have ever seen anyone non-major commercial, biggest root ball I've ever seen handled. When it came off the truck, we needed a forklift to get it down. The estimates for the weight of this were 700 pounds, and that was probably before it rained all over it. And this is an evergreen that's from Alaska, so it's technically native North America, not native to New England. Does very well in New England and doesn't, the shape has been selected presumably to not break with heavy snow, wet snow, so it sheds snow in winter. I actually have a couple of these in my yard. It makes a great privacy screening, breaks up the view in a yard without creating a wall of Christmas trees or a very dark. I love them and they do very well here. This again was one that I called around to find. It doesn't, the root ball is pretty big too, but it's probably more like 300, 350 pounds. And this tree will never get enormously big, unlike some of our local evergreens, which will get to be 50, 80 feet. You don't want that in most suburban yards. It's just too big. And I will say the birds love it in my yard. They spend a lot of time sitting on it. The branches being relatively green on the bottom side only and having open, they can easily perch without getting right into the foliage. So I think that it meets enough of my criteria that I'm happy to use it in an ecosystem function yard. A peach tree, this is, will I imagine, be mostly for human consumption. A good sized specimen again, and look, it's already full of fruits and it's probably lost some in transport and because it wasn't in the ground. It is Alberta peach, heavy fruit set and really delicious fruit. Freestone peach. And see, here's a couple that shriveled up because it was in a bucket, not in the water. So, I mean in the ground. So here's some more. So it's going to be very happy to get into the ground. They all will. And next year I expect it will flower and fruit prodigiously. Oh yeah, look, there's a lot of them up here. See, all of these are wannabe peaches. And when you do plant stuff, woody plants in general should get a minimum of 1 inch a week between you and rain, all the way until the turn of the year, until January of the next year. I found that when I do that, the success I have goes up to almost 100%. I've lost, I think, no woody plants under that watering regime. And of course, if it's dry, do more. The transplanting process is quite destructive of their fine hair roots. It makes it hard for them to take up water. So the more you help them with that, the more quickly they will establish and recover from the shock of being transplanted, which is what it boils down to, transplanted out of their pots into your soil. I mentioned this homeowner is particularly fond of chartreuse and wine and burgundy color. So this is another elderberry with the leaves of that color. You want to be careful with colors like that because the whole yard, if it were all those two, it would get awfully bright. It would be a little bit difficult too. There's not that much in nature. So this might be my personal favorite plant in the yard of the woody plants we've put in so far, of the 50 plus woody plants we've put in. This is a Chinquapin Oak, and I love it for several reasons. It's native from New England to northeastern Mexico. They say limestone is its preferred ground, but it does well. It's quite broad in its tastes. It is one of the top 10 tree types that Doug Tallamy talks about for supporting insect life and birds and other things. And it was kind of a coup to find because I couldn't find it anywhere in New England and ended up getting it mail order, actually by FedEx, from a nursery in Nebraska. It came in a box 6 foot tall. It had lost most of its leaves because it turns out FedEx trucks are not air conditioned, but it revived beautifully and it has added all of this new growth in the 2 weeks that it's been in the ground. You'll also notice that it has some little holes here. Something is eating it, which makes me happy because that's why we are going native, so that the insects that would normally feed here have something to eat. In fact, this is a good moment to talk about why native is so important. Plants in general are the food for many other species. You know, in our food pyramid, plants is the bottom, except for what's under the soil, but what's above the ground, plants is the base, because so many creatures, six-legged, eight-legged, two-legged, four-legged, eat plants. Plants, of course, over evolutionary time have developed defenses against being eaten by those creatures. And when you have a native plant, it is a plant that is where the natural herbivores are occurring. So there are specialized insects on almost every plant species. If those species aren't there, even if you have something green, they're not going to be able to, the herbivores are not going to be able to eat the non-natives because they haven't evolved with that plant and they can't bypass the defenses of those plants. Either they won't eat them at all, or they will not be able to digest them, or it doesn't have the right nutrients. So having that match of native plants and native species is what keeps the whole ecosystem going. I don't know why these are not more available locally. I actually bought several because they were so choice. And unlike many oaks, this will not grow to be 100 feet by 50 feet. This is going to be a much smaller tree and therefore much more appropriate for a suburban yard. This native is called cotinus or smokebush. It gets to be sort of 6 or 8 even by 4 or 5 feet. It picks up the color theme of this garden. You might remember was kind of burgundy or wine color, which is particularly the new growth, and chartreuse. And it fills in nicely. It gives you good privacy 3 seasons. It's called a smokebush because the plumes are very lacy and diffuse and look like little clouds of smoke. This is another native. This is Inkberry. Although we're at the northernmost edge of its range, it does occur here naturally. It's a nice evergreen that gives a change from hollies or rhododendrons. Unlike hollies, it does not have, but like rhododendrons, it does not have any spines on it, so it's something you can put in a high traffic area. People can brush up against it without getting any pricking on them. And it's a great color. It can give you privacy. It comes in a couple of different forms. So for both bird and human benefit, we have 6 different viburnum plants of several different species, native species. This is a linden or Indian viburnum. These got broken when the plant was being put into the ground. Because it's such a big plant, it was a little hard to get out of its pot. You can see it's already full of fruits. The flowers are fragrant. Fruits are much beloved by birds, and in fall this thing will turn very deep scarlet, so although it is deciduous, it gives 4-season interest.